Prince George is about to host the 2020 World Women's Curling Championship.
It was just a few months ago, Prince George was named the host city of the 2020 World Women's Curling Championship. And now we're exactly 365 days away. 13 teams from around the world will play in Prince George from March 14th to 22nd. That will be the first World Curling Federation event to be hosted here, but the city is no stranger to curling.
We'll sweep your hearts into the next millennium with the year 2000 Scott Tournament of Hearts in Prince George, British Columbia.
It's been done here before, and it takes quite a bit of work to transform the CN Centre into a curling rink.
There will be a team that come here with Curling Canada, ice experts, curling ice experts, to help assist our ice team to create the perfect curling ice. The ice has to be pebbled for the rocks to curl properly, and so that'll be part of the whole week event of getting the ice ready for the curling event.
That's just one of many things the CN Centre will have to prep before welcoming the world.
The great thing about the Prince George and our facilities here is that we will have the curling here, and then literally steps away will be the patch, which will be the entertainment center for the event. So Kin 1 will be turned into this fantastic entertainment and social center where people will be able to watch the curling on the screens and socialize, and plus hear various bands and entertainment that are taking place throughout the week.
People will be coming from all over the province to attend this event, so we should see a huge economic impact.
It's estimated the curling championship will bring in about $5 million in economic impact to the community. The 2018 event in North Bay broke attendance records, and it's hoped that will happen once again in just a year's time.
And for a year, that was the plan. But 10 days before the event, representatives of Northern Health went before Council expressing some growing concerns with a new virus and the risks it posed, with 4 teams coming from countries widely impacted. And 2 days later, the World Curling Federation opted to cancel the World Women's Curling Championships in Prince George. Not 1 hour after the World Curling Federation cancelled the World Women's Curling Championships, crews were wrapping up the cables, getting ready to go home.
Obviously, it's with great disappointment we make this announcement today, but it's, in our opinion, the right decision, and we want to thank Northern Health, the province, the City of Prince George, Curling Canada, our partners in delivering this event, for their collaboration in putting the event on, first of all, and now in today's decision.
Prince George is about to host the 2020 World Women's Curling Championship.
For Mayor Lynn Hall, who has sought major events since the Canada Winter Games, this is a huge blow.
Since 2015, we talked about being able to host world-class games, and we've had the fortunate opportunity to be able to do that. So it was an exciting time to make the announcement, and today is just the opposite. It's a very, very sad time. But we understand the decision, and as I said, we're certainly supportive of the decision that the World Curling Federation has made.
The decision was made after much consideration with local and provincial health officials, despite the fact there have been no COVID-19 cases in Northern Health to date.
Things are still evolving. We've been aware that the situation has been evolving for a number of weeks and been monitoring that. Some things that have happened around the world, and like the Federation and the Mayor listed, there have been some pretty big decisions and changes in international status around the COVID situation.
The Curling Federation was asked why the decision was made so late, with the first day of events set to kick off tomorrow.
We've been monitoring the situation for a number of weeks now, looking at it, and the advice has always pointed to it's still fine for the competition to go ahead. We've considered all elements and all implications of that, and today, looking overnight, there were some significant competitions across the world cancelled.
And if the global reaction to the coronavirus is any indication, this could be the scene at many World Curling Federation competitions set to take place in locations like Glasgow, Scotland, Kelowna and Slovenia. A crushing blow. There were assurances the event would make a return to the city, but who knew when? COVID was an unknown entity at the time, and then out of the blue, last June, a seemingly innocuous report to Council revealed next steps. Prince George will host the World Women's Curling Championships next year.
It was very much the first event that had to be cancelled, and people were literally setting up when the decision had to come down not to have it take place. So it was pretty heartbreaking at the time. And now to start coming out to see the light at the end of the tunnel and to have this as the bookend that opens it up for us, it just couldn't be a nicer fit.
Somewhat poetic. It was the first event to go for the city of Prince George because of the pandemic, and it will be the first major event to come back after the pandemic. But there is much work to be done between now and March.
We'll have to do the entire build-up in the organization, but we have people. Many of the people have continued on or returned. So, yeah, a lot of work ahead.
Council got that ball rolling Monday night by recommitting to in-kind funds related to things like venue rentals, specialized support, and the construction of a media box. And the money committed in 2019 is still there.
When we went into the pandemic, we had $200,000 approved from the Major Events Reserve to help support the women's curling. And of course that got, initially canceled and then postponed, and then we got the opportunity to come back again afterwards. So that money had been set aside, it had been preserved through each successive year, and now that opportunity has come up again.
However, the city is quick to note that the event is not official until Curling Canada makes it so. However, Council learned on Monday night that an event announcement and ticket sales will be announced in the weeks to come. And we learned a little bit about the uniqueness of this event.
For many, the sounds of an energetic curling game may sound unusual. However, for the seasoned curling fan, the chance to watch the world's top players in their hometown will be a rare and exciting opportunity.
When they're out on the ice, when they're playing themselves, they'll speak Japanese, they'll speak Korean, they'll speak Chinese, they'll yell at each other in their own languages. And a lot of times the fans that follow them are a lot more explicit than a Canadian fan might be, who just sits back and watches the game, who understands the game. They really get into it, the action.
Inside the CN Centre, flags from each competing country will hang from the rafters. The playing surface will also have a slightly different look.
Well, the field of play for curling is a little bit different. The sheets of ice are a little wider. They're all the same length. But other than that, we bring in some international officials. We bring in Canadian officials. So we have about 15 certified officials that come in here to do the umpiring for the event.
This is the first time the CN Centre has hosted an international sporting championship.
Well, we'll be looking forward to working both with Curling Canada and the World Curling Federation, who we expect will be giving us some guidelines on some of the different protocols, right, some of the flags that we'll be requiring to have here on site, maybe some language issues we might be dealing with, even possibly some food issues that we have to supply different things through our catering company here for different culinary needs that we might need to offer as well.
Teams from around the world are expected to arrive a few days before the start of the championship, which begins March 14th.
One of the unique things about this collection of curlers is the number of Canadian coaches.
There's no question, Team Canada is the one drawing the fans to the CN Centre this week. It's the advantage of being Team Canada competing in Canada. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's not other teams you can be rooting for. While some teams may be opponents, they may also have some Canadian connections. For example, Team Denmark, who has Calgary's Heather Rogers as their coach.
I feel very lucky, truthfully. So it all started, the girls didn't have a coach, and it all started when COVID hit and Women's Worlds was moved from Switzerland to Calgary. They knew it was going to be in the Calgary bubble, and they didn't have a lot of funding. So they were looking for a Calgarian coach if possible, but definitely a Canadian. They've been coached by Canadians before, and they've had great experiences. So my name got pushed forward, and we were connected through a few people, and it all started in Calgary.
Obviously, with the World Women's Curling Championships moved to the bubble in Calgary last year, it played a major part in Rogers being brought on board. With restrictions, it made for an easy fit for the 30-year-old, but Calgary has also earned a bit of reputation for itself when it comes to the sport of curling.
I think we're just lucky. I mean, Alberta has a ton of curling history and a lot of experience there. I've been fortunate I played competitively in Alberta my whole life. I've been coached by some great people. So I think there's just a big pool of curlers and coaches to choose from.
And the entire experience being a Canadian while coaching another country's team has been incredible for Rogers, especially being able to do so while staying on home soil as well.
I mean, they've brought me on the journey of a lifetime. They brought me to the Olympics with them. It was a dream come true. And it's fantastic to be in Canada. This team loves Canadian fans, and for them to be able to play in front of Canadian fans that are knowledgeable about the sport is a huge opportunity.
While Denmark hasn't won the Worlds in over 40 years, Rogers is bringing a sense of positivity to her team, and it's showing right here in Prince George.
Elaine Daigle-Jackson has been around the game of curling for a bit, so with so much experience and time spent around a curling rink, it's no surprise she knows a thing or two about the game.
Elaine Daigle-Jackson comes from a family rich in curling history, so when it comes to Prince George, a city that has 100-plus years of curling history itself, the 66-year-old has spent plenty of time in the Northern Capital well before this year's World Women's Curling Championships.
Way back in the old days, my dad played against Kevin Duke Smale in the provincial final in this building up here where I guess the crowd just went crazy during that final game. And of course, Prince George won that one. And then back in 2000, it's a long time ago, I coached the Kelly Law team, British Columbia, here in Prince George, where we had the most amazing experience.
Prince George became a home away from home of sorts for Daigle-Jackson.
I've been to Prince George many times over the years, and we used to come to the old legendary cash spiel that went on for many years here, and it was a wonderful competition that people came from all over Western Canada for that. So coming back in 2000 was again like kind of coming home or coming back to some place I felt really comfortable with.
Realizing she wasn't going to be a professional curler herself, she turned to coaching at a relatively young age. While she's a proud Canadian, it was overseas where she was first able to earn herself a paycheck.
I was able to coach Japan, the Japan national team, and through to the Japan Nagano Olympics, which was incredible. Went on and did a couple years for Korea. And then finally, Canada was in a position where I was able to come back to the home team where my heart has always been. And as things became more competitive in the curling world, coaching became more important. The Olympics is a factor, and I've been lucky enough to be working with Curling Canada and other curling initiatives for almost 20 years now.
Returning to Prince George, she hopes the sport of curling gains some interest in the city with the hosting of the World Women's Curling Championships.
I know there's many people locally who know how important curling is to this community, and you look at this historical treasure behind me here with the Kelly Cup having been here for generations. It's very special to be back in Prince George and to know that, you know, maybe we'll revitalize the interest a little bit more in curling in Prince George and make sure that these sheets out here are full all the time, because we can inspire some young people to start curling.
Curling is not a complicated sport. Throw the rocks from one end to the next. Simple, right? Right.
The objective of curling is to deliver the rocks down to the other end of the ice and score the most points by getting them in the house, the circles.
And that's where it starts, in the house. And there are 2 of those, one at each end. And then there are the rocks. There are 8 of those for each team.
Hockey has 3 periods. Curling has 8 ends. You throw all 8 rocks down, 2 per player, 4 players per team, 8 rocks per total. That's one end of play. Then you throw them back, will be your second end, for a total of 8 ends. The team with the highest score after 8 ends wins the game.
And then there's that. Those are the skips giving rather forceful instructions to the rest of the team members. Curling has a language all its own.
You'll hear the term hack you mentioned is where you put your feet in. The house is the target for the objective to get the rocks in. And then you have terms you'll hear like draw. That means to curl the rock into the button area. You'll have takeout, where they want to remove the stones. And then the teams will have different unique terms for their own team if you're watching it on TV.
Another common term in this game is what's called the hammer. And who gets the hammer is determined right off the top.
At the start of the game, there's a coin flip in league play. In the 2020 Women's World, you'll see them what's called draw to the button. So more of a competitive way of doing it. Normally it's a coin flip. The team that wins the coin flip elects to take the hammer or the last shot, or they can pick a color if they're superstitious of rock.
And curling is not just curling. What's happening here is called stirling. There's actually a stirling league in Prince George that has a whole different set of rules. The World Women's Curling Championships are coming here this spring, and that is a league of its own.
A league play we talked about is 8 ends. Some of the higher level curling events you'll see maybe 10 ends. It depends on the level of curling. The World Curling Federation may be slightly different than Curling Canada, which would be slightly different than your normal league play in a city.
Hopefully that helps a little bit to understand this popular sport, one of the world's oldest team sports, inherited from Scotland in the 16th century. There is a science to curling, everything from making the ice to the rocks that are thrown down it.
Literally scrape as flat as we can.
There is a science to ice. Whatever the sport, the ice is different in every case. Curling is no exception.
Underneath the curling rink itself is a cement floor, and we slowly build it up in layers. There's probably 20 to 30 layers of ice to achieve 1.25 inches thickness. We try to keep it right in that range. It's more expensive to keep it colder after.
But there are literally layers to curling ice. It starts with misting and flooding the concrete pad to get it as level as possible. Once a certain depth is achieved, it is painted white to give it that eye-popping clean look. After that, there are more layers, some of which are very rudimentary, despite the fact curling is hundreds of years old.
You'll see the rings, the house. It's a fabric material. It's laid down. Then multiple layers of flooding again. And the lines are put in, which is, as a little aside, is knitting yarn. It's just stretched out and froze in by hand. Then multiple layers again, the hog lines, and a few more layers to finish it, and then we'll do the surfacing process. It's a scraping, a pebbling.
Curling is also a sport of precision. Mere inches or less could win the game. And it all starts from the ground up, literally.
We try to have the best quality surface we can prepare. So that starts right back at the initial flooding, where we have special deionization tanks to make the water cleaner than your drinking water, for example. It's pH controlled, so we get a very hard type of ice.
Despite all the work to make that ice as perfect as it can be, nothing is perfect. And that can be part of the game itself for the individual teams.
There's always subtleties to it, and if you watch it on TV, you'll hear them saying, you know, the nuances of the ice that day. It may be a little straighter, it'll have what they call runs, where maybe the pebble is wore down. Because the weight of the rock over the course of the game will wear the sheet differently depending where it's thrown, and they will subtly have changes to the ice, particularly at that level. They'll pick up that much more than your recreational curler would.
Come March 8th, this coming Sunday, this ice at the CN Centre will be transformed from an ice hockey surface into a curling surface for the World Women's Curling Championships. That transformation will have to happen over the course of a few short days. Clearly, no easy feat. Many sports, like curling, are steeped in tradition. Take the curling rock. Courtesy the Women's World Curling Championships, we learned the materials used to make the rocks comes from only one place in the world.
They're referred to as a curling stone, and they're actually made out of granite. They have multiple pieces: the handle, the stone itself, the striking band, and the bottom part is called the running surface, and this is the most important part of the rock. This particular rocks that we have what's called blue hone, and it's a fine granitic material that's mined on the Ilse Island in Scotland.
And that's the only place in the world where they get that rock?
That's correct. It's considered the best material for a curling stone, and all your Women's World Curling or Olympic events will all have rock from that island.
The center of the curling stone is concave on the bottom. That's the running surface. And only a thin piece of that surface, called the running band, touches the ice. It's the friction on the running band that causes the rock to curl.
Stone has to weigh 44 pounds, and these stones will be very similar to what they're using on TV, with the exception of they'll have the light in them to aid for TV for the hog line. Color is just to designate the team, so it can be any color you want. In our particular rink, the numbers are for the sheet you're playing on. There's multiple sheets in a rink. This happens to be sheet number 5. The number of the rock, you'll see them numbered 1 through 8. There's 8 rocks delivered in a curling end. And the rule in curling is you must throw the same stone or rock each end.
Skip Jimmy Musselwhite says each rock has its own personality.
Each rock does have a different personality. Believe it or not, they really do. Even the professionals select specific rocks during the course of their bonspiel in order to be in the finals with the rocks that they like and know what they'll do.
So if each rock has a personality, how does a curler know what it's going to do?
Well, as you're playing the game, you learn the personality of the rocks. We each throw the same numbers each end. Like being the skip, I throw rock number 7 and rock number 8. And by the second time I throw the rock, I'm pretty sure what it's going to do for me. And you do that, you judge accordingly.
But at more elite levels, like the World Women's Curling Championships, choosing the rock is very serious business.
They have a practice time at the Women's Worlds, and that'll allow them to try all the rocks. And then the skip or whomever will designate the 2 rocks that they're going to play with, and they'll continue to play with those rocks throughout the entire game.
Now, when you take in the World Women's Curling Championships in March, you'll have a whole new appreciation for the art of the curling stone. Major sports teams have mascots to represent their teams as well as keep the fans engaged in the game. This is Slider. You may have seen him roaming around the CN Centre, entertaining fans, helping them cheer on the Team Canada, and even causing a little trouble. Well, our very own Anthony Correa got a chance to catch up with Curling Canada's mascot.
We are here at the CN Centre with Slider, the Curling Canada mascot. And Slider, if you don't mind, we're going to play a quick game called right hand, left hand. So if that's okay with you? Perfect. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and basically you're going to put your right hand up for one answer, your left hand up for the other. So I guess first off, we'll start off with a curling-related topic. We'll go right hand, red rocks, left hand, yellow rocks. So which one would you prefer? And he goes with the red rocks. Nice, nice, nice. All right, now, Slider, if you were on a curling team, would you be this one the lead or this one the skip? Oh, yeah, he wants to be the skip. He is the leader of this team. Absolutely. Awesome. Now, we'll go a little bit into food-related questions, because who doesn't love food? So we'll go right hand donut, left hand cookie. Oh, yes, the donut. Who doesn't love donuts? I mean, Tim Hortons donuts are always the best. And we'll go one more food-related question. We will go right hand pizza, left hand burger. He has to think long and hard about this one, yeah. Oh, he goes pizza, and the sauce, the cheese, maybe cheering for Team Italy out there, potentially. Awesome. And final one, we have, where would you like to stay in, I guess, Canada? We got right hand Prince George or left hand anywhere else in Canada. Yes, of course, right hand Prince George. I mean, that is where all the action is here.
And even if you aren't a fan of curling, there's still a place where everyone can gather and learn about the sport, and it's quite a colorful place.
Welcome to the Patch, the place you want to be at curling events since 1982.
So in Brandon, 1982, they had more people wanting to watch the curling than could actually get into the arena. They didn't have enough seats in the arena. They also had a situation where they didn't have enough finances to finance the entire event, so they created a bar beside it to create some revenue, but also to give people a place to go watch the game on big screens. It became a tradition after that, and has just grown ever since.
Curling patches over the years have been large and small, but one thing is a constant: it's always a fun place to be. And now it makes its return to Kin 1 after the championships got cancelled in 2020.
So it's great to be back. You know, we ventured down this road a few years ago and then COVID stopped us, but we're happy to be back here.
The best part? It's completely free to get in.
With many activities to do throughout the week, whether that's during games or after games, the place is always expected to be buzzing.
We have games going on between the draws on the ice is when we're busy in the patch, and people can come play games. It's no cost to sign up. Minors are allowed until 8 o'clock in the evening, and then it becomes an adult-orientated venue. We also have live bands most nights. The party is in the patch all week long, so there's no admission charge to get in. Come on down.
Don't believe me? Just ask these fans.
The patch is awesome. I danced my face off last night. It was so good. And I came back again and it was perfect. I was able to dance with some people that were watching me last night.
It's good that everybody can get out and socialize or whatever. Yeah, it's really a good time.
It's a lot of fun. It's great to be able to play a bit of curling with my grandson and have a great meal.
You know what, Prince George? We're here to party. Come and join us.
For one particular curling fan, getting to the CN Centre for the World Women's Curling Championships came with some history.
If you've happened to make your way to the CN Centre this week to take in some of the World Women's Curling Championships, you may have also come across an interesting character. This is 60-year-old Dee Hopley, and her chicken hat have become a staple when it comes to curling events. But where did this unique tradition start?
Okay, well, it started when my younger sister Skip brought 4 back from Vegas, thinking what an ideal thing to do, and they traveled for a few local spiels and to my local town, and it was such a hit. And then Roar of the Rings in Winnipeg came up. My sister thought, there's 8 of us going, I'll buy some more chicken hats and we'll keep track of each other. And it was just such a crazy hit.
Everywhere they went, people knew. And Dee and her husband, Grant, had so much fun doing it, they continued ever since.
We were curling fans before that. We just didn't wear silly things on our heads before that.
2 years ago, Grant passed after being diagnosed with MDS, or more commonly known as pre-leukemia. And last year, she lost another member of the chicken coop.
I have to continue with it because a very dear friend of ours who passed, he encouraged us to step it up, and we became, the 4 of us did things together and visited outside of curling, and I just have to keep doing it.
And with the number of tournaments she's been to, a pin for just about every single one, the burning question had to be asked.
Yes.
Have you ever washed it?
Oh, okay. We didn't. And then I found out at the Women's Worlds that, they can get a little odoriferous after a few events because I swapped hats with a Swiss fan just for a photo op. And that night I was like, well, the obvious. And so, they get defrocked and washed after every event now.
While she's made the trip to Prince George on her own, she sticks with tradition as a way to bring a smile to the game.
I'm just very blessed. So it still is a surprise that it gets so much reaction after 10 years. It just is funny.
And it was fun. Aside from COVID making its presence felt again with Team Scotland and Team Japan having to bow out, the event went off without a hitch. And Prince George can say with pride it put on a good show, albeit 2 years after the fact.